a Midwest college football podcast, joined as always by Clinton Boring. My name is Ryan Sadkowiak, and Clinton, we have officially done it. We've reached fall preview season. It might be hotter than the surface of the sun outside, but there is football to talk. It is that time of year. We are 1 month away from camps commencing, and we are starting off our fall preview series here. Once again, welcoming in Matt Shelton from the Wildcat Report on the soon-to-be expanded On3 network here in about 3.5 hours or so officially, I guess. Like, what time does it officially go over, Matt? Is it once midnight comes, or you guys wait until the morning?
Yeah, probably midnight Eastern, I think.
Nice. I will not be up for that. I will be in bed. Thank you again, Matt, for joining us. Matt was kind enough to join us a year ago. Kind enough again to join us tonight, sir. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Clinton, sir, how are you holding up?
I'm great, man. We made it through the off season, at least for you and I. We don't have to come up with any more random material to try to talk about to pass the time. We are officially, might as well call it July. July's in 3 short hours here on the East Coast. We're almost there. We're getting closer to Big Ten Media Days, so I've been stoked all day to talk about this. I've got some coworkers who listen to the show. They're ready to partake in listening to our fall previews and get ready. So I'm excited to talk to Matt and learn a little more about the Northwestern Wildcats.
It should be fun, man. I'm excited we're here. It's been a long off season. The season was long, but it's good to be back.
Well, Ryan, we don't want to leave you out. How are you doing, Ryan?
Oh, I'm great. I golfed way too much the last 3.5 days, and my elbows are killing me. And I actually played better today than I did the last two, so at least I'm not mad at myself. That's good.
It's called being in your 30s, man.
I had a 4-day weekend, which was nice. So I have not don't remember how to do my job when I walk in tomorrow. So that'll be an adventure.
Nice. All right, guys. Well, if you're joining us tonight on YouTube, you can find us there at ITP CFB. You can also find us next morning if you can't ever join us when we're live in your podcast platforms, whether that be Amazon, Apple, Spotify. We are wherever you can get a podcast downloaded. Please also check us out on our social platforms, Instagram and Twitter at ITPCFB. Ryan, let's do it.
So last year, our concept on this was the 5 burning questions. Today, we're going to make it a little more alcohol themed or sparkling water themed, since that's all I ever drink. Our 6-pack of questions here. And I have a
Hey, those mountains blue?
It's inside the pylon 6-pack of questions.
I spent way too much time making that sound a week ago, and I'm very happy how it turned out.
It's beautiful.
I told you guys last week it's going on my resume. That is just going to be my CV is that sound. So starting us off here with question number 1. I should just open my can right now. Last year with Northwestern here, Matt, the quarterback position was, I don't know if an issue is the right word. It certainly wasn't a bright spot of this offense. There were some good moments. There were a lot of not as good moments between Mike Wright and Jack Lausch, and they went to the portal to address that with Preston Stone, the former SMU starting quarterback. Is it a foregone conclusion that he's going to be the guy in 2025, or is there going to be a true battle between him and the incumbent Lausch?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think it's fair to call it an issue. You know, anytime when you go through a battle in fall camp, you pick a guy, and then 2 weeks into the season, you switch your starter. Again, that's just flat out an issue, and that was reflected in a 4-8 finish. It's a very different situation this year. You know, Preston Stone is it's his absolutely pretty much empirically his job. You know, his last healthy season at SMU, he threw for nearly 3,200 yards, 28 touchdowns. If he replicated those numbers at Northwestern, which again, that's a big difference between SMU was still a G5 team then, before the move to the ACC, and then obviously this is Big Ten competition. Different offensive coordinator, whole 9 yards there. But, you know, those passing numbers in single season yards, that would be 4th all time at Northwestern. In passing touchdowns, that would be 1st all time at Northwestern. So his pedigree is pretty much unparalleled in the quarterback room. You know, he's, like I said, pretty much head and shoulders ahead of the rest of the group, and that's reflected for the first time. You mentioned media days. For the first time since 2018, Northwestern is sending a quarterback as a representative to media days. So Preston Stone will be one of the guys taking questions, which I think is pretty indicative for a program that has hated the quarterback question with a passion for the 21st century. You know, Fitzgerald made a meal of it every time. Braun has had his own, trials and tribulations, taking quarterback battles all the way to drive one week one. They really hate to tip their cards on this question, and they're tipping pretty heavy right now. So I think that tells you what you need to know about that position. Again, I think Preston in a vacuum is just very much the go-to guy. Like, I think they thought that coming out of spring. There have been a couple other developments since then that have also really shown. Again, when you mentioned Jack Lausch as the number 2 quarterback, that might not end up being the case. We'll kind of see how the summer continues to play out. There are a couple variables there that have, like I said, have come up in the past in the past few weeks here. First of all, kind of the first domino there is they went out and they got a second transfer quarterback out of the portal. They got Gavin Frakes from Oklahoma, which on paper there, that sounds like really big program to get a quarterback from, and it sounds like he might be battling with Stone. But when you dig a little deeper, this is probably more of a take to get some more emergency depth or a number 2 quarterback option. Frakes, like I said, he's coming from Oklahoma, but he had transferred to Oklahoma, which is home state from within the same cycle. He had been at Virginia for the last 2 seasons. Didn't end up taking a snap there. The last time he played was 2022 at New Mexico State. He went 5-6, threw for about 750 yards, 4 touchdowns, 7 picks. So he has experience, not a crazy strong resume. Again, that's one element from a roster perspective that's just shown that it's Stone's job, but still a surprising move to many, given that Lausch started 10 games last season. And on that front, this isn't. I haven't talked to Jack or talked to someone in the program about this. This is just me looking at what's publicly available. Jack really seems to be focusing more and more on baseball. He had legitimate major league buzz out of high school before he went to Northwestern as a scholarship quarterback. He started playing baseball again, splitting time with spring practice this spring. Again, he had a solid season for the Wildcats there, and this summer he's playing for the Williamsport Crosscutters in the MLB Draft League. And you retain your amateur status when you play in that league, but it is in the name of the league. When that is what amateur players who are looking to put together more at-bats, more tape, who want to get drafted, that's where they go. So, again, I don't have any news to break on this at this point, but it looks like Jack is focusing more and more on baseball on that front. So, again, when you talk in terms of quarterback battle, so long as he's healthy, it's going to be Stone's job week one, far and away.
That's a tough position, too, to do the dual sport thing, especially in spring practice when as the quarterback you're kind of expected. Like, hey, you got to be there. You got to learn any new installs. You got to develop chemistry with the line, the wide receivers. And was he originally committed to Notre Dame for just baseball? Or where was he originally committed?
Yes. So he was originally going to walk on for he was going to be a dual sport at Notre Dame for baseball and football. I believe if I remember correctly, you can't be a scholarship for another sport and walk on to football.
Yep.
Because that is how I feel like some teams in the past were circumventing rules. So I think he was going to be like a very super preferred walk-on for baseball and then a standard preferred walk-on for football at Notre Dame. And this was back when Notre Dame baseball was competing at a really high level. But yeah, that was the original plan. Then Northwestern came in with the scholarship for football, and his path changed there.
Nice. Well, everyone knows a quarterback needs weapons to be successful, Matt. Enter transfer wide receiver Griffin Wilde. How much of an impact do you see him? Wilde. Yeah,
sorry,
How much of
last year they had Lujan. This year it's going to be Wilde. It's going to be everybody. Trust me, I'm on the tour. I'm on the pronunciation guide tour.
Well, how much of an impact, especially in what feels like a relatively inexperienced receiver room, how much of an impact do you see him having in this room and offense for 2025?
Wilde will be huge. I mean, it might not be an exaggeration to say he makes or breaks the offense. He can replicate his FCS production. I mean, he was phenomenal last season. I mean, filled up the stat sheet, 70 catches, 1,100 yards, 12 touchdowns. If he can be close to that level for Northwestern, it'd be seismic. Northwestern hasn't had a 1,000-yard receiver since I believe it's Austin Carr in 2016. So it's been a long time since they've had a true number one guy that defenses have to worry about. I mean, they've had a series of good receivers in the meantime. Ramad Chalkio Bowman, Bryce Kurtz, AJ Henning, Cam Johnson. I always go to Calvin Johnson because there was also Calvin Johnson the second who just transferred out. But anyways, Cam Johnson, they've had a lot of different solid guys in like the 600 to 800 range, but they really haven't had their 1A guy that almost every game they could say, this is a guy that's going to get us like 80 plus yards. No doubt about it. And Willie has shown at the South Dakota State level that that's what he can be. And if he, they just flat out need him to be that good. Because further down the line, the two guys that are probably at the wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3 spots are Ricky Amarazi and Frank Covey IV. And Amarazi was injured I don't know if it was week 1, but I believe he only played in one game last year before he was injured for the rest of the season. And then Frank Covey had 10 catches. So the staff has trusted their evaluation of what they have on roster. They went out and they got Wilde, and they've brought in, I think it honestly might be 10, 12 transfers since then at a variety of other positions. So they have seen that they think what they have on roster is a position of strength. But in order for those inexperienced guys to have leeway, to find their sea legs at the Big Ten level, Wilde needs to pan out as a guy that can draw the defense and still produce. So he is, again, he's a make or break player for them this year.
Well, I think the encouraging thing about him, too, is twofold. Is one, if you look at kind of the game log from last year, arguably his best game came against the only FBS team that South Dakota State played in Oklahoma State. And say what you want about Oklahoma State, there's still going to be a mismatch in competition there, even for as good as South Dakota State was. But also talking about the offensive coordinator, Zach Lujan, this is a guy who he should be intimately familiar with since their paths crossed, at least for a year in 2023 at South Dakota State. So kind of fascinating kind of subplot there to that as well.
Yeah, they have done a good job of drawing in, and obviously the big banner player from South Dakota State has been Mark Gronowski the past 2 seasons, and Gronowski chose to stay last year in the portal window, and now he's gone to Iowa. And I think based on it's weird that they don't play Iowa this year. It would have been awesome to see. There are like 4 or 5 different like rematches, or call it what you will, of like there are so many great matchups if they were playing the Hawkeyes this season. But Mark Gronowski did not end up being a Wildcat. But further down the line, they have done a great job of drawing from South Dakota State, both with Wilde, and they also have offensive lineman, probably offensive guard Evan Bjornson, who was, I believe, AP second team FCS All-American. And he's probably a prohibitive starter. So they've done a good job this season of drawing 2 probably key players, 2 probably day one starters from Zach Lujan's former offense, which I think is a testament to his connection, because the offensive struggles were significant last season. They were one of the worst scoring offenses in the NCAA FBS. But I think it's a testament to his, to his scheme and his ability to build relationships that he was still able to win 2 key transfer recruiting battles a year apart from having coached the guys. So I think, again, Gronowski is probably the guy that a lot of people initially wanted as the Lujan connection. But I also think internally they would rather have Stone, and I think they've picked up two big guys from that connection this year.
Well, I think that's a good segue into kind of question number 3 is he's known for kind of having that ground attack with South Dakota State, and obviously having a quarterback like Gronowski certainly helps with his threat on the ground. And last year, for the deficiencies that Wright and Lausch might have had throwing the ball, but they were still adept at running, maybe not as much design quarterback runs, but certainly a lot with the scramble. And that's not really been Preston Stone's game, and we kind of saw that play out a little bit with the weird split that SMU was doing early in the season with, Stone's the throw guy, and we'll mix in Kevin Jennings, and that was just kind of a nightmare. But how do you envision the ground game kind of looking with a more pocket passer-ish, we'll call him, quarterback in Preston Stone in 2025?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of frustration that there weren't more designed quarterback runs last season when there were 2+ running quarterbacks in Wright and Lausch. I think a lot of that there is a level of that is a genuine critique. I think there's also a level of You start to look at the inexperience that was further down the quarterback depth chart that they didn't want to get to a point of further injuries. And also, I don't think, I think one of the issues, it's a pro and a con of, I think when you look at tape from South Dakota State, there are a lot of great and gaudy plays where you're like, well, why don't you just run that quarterback power or that quarterback counter every play? And it's like, well, if you run that against the Big Ten, your Jack Louch is going to be in pieces 3 yards that way. Like, it's just a different level of physicality up front, and they just didn't have that on the offensive line last year. They maybe didn't have that at the point of even at the start of the season when they had all 5 of their guys healthy, but they ended up starting 9 different players due to injury, due to depth chart, trying to find the right mix after a few guys were knocked out. So I think the key frame around the offensive struggles last season is that, yes, there were some systemic issues, but they really struggled to set the tone up front on the offensive line. And that has been kind of similar to what I was talking about with Griffin Wilde of like, they have gone out and staked their claim on, we are going to make a difference in the transfer portal up front. They are keeping Caleb Tiernan, who is the franchise left tackle, probably the top 1 or top 2 pro prospect on the team. I think he's a real chance to get drafted this time next year or 10 months from now or whatever it is on the calendar. He is your mountain of a man. I think he's like 6'7", 329, has his own gravitational pull. But then elsewhere online, they brought in Bjornsson, like I mentioned, and also Xavier Gray, who is similarly sized from Liberty. Their offensive line this season should start at least three transfers, counting Jack Bailey who transferred in last season but missed the last 8 games of the season due to a torn ACL. But he has a medical redshirt, so he'll be back. And 4 of the 5 starters at least will be in their 5th year or more of college football. So they are very experienced up front and also very new up front. So if that can gel quickly, that will be a totally different frame of reference for the offense than last season. So I think that will be kind of half of the equation for getting an effective run game going that doesn't need to rely on the quarterback itself being a threat. Is just that there are a lot of, frankly, grown men up front this time who, like I said, have tons and tons of experience and tons of reps to draw on. And then also I think they are crossing their fingers for better health in the running back room. Cam Porter is another big-time veteran. He's heading into his 6th year of college football. He's always shown flashes, and there's no doubting Cam's talent. He just has had some issues with injuries, just plain and simple. He really showed out. He was key to them, the closing of their 2020 season, beating Illinois, beating Auburn in the Citrus Bowl. Both of those wins are very important contributions by Cam in that season. Then unfortunately suffered a season-ending injury in the following camp. And he's kind of put it together more and more. He has back-to-back seasons where he's had 125-plus carries and 500-plus yards. But he's always kind of had something nagging or lingering a little bit. So they think if they can kind of get, like, one last dance, if you get Cam healthy to be your bell cow back, actually get him his true full season of health, he can really produce at a next level for them. I think, again, in when he's shown his flashes, you watch him play and you think that is an above average, like that is a top 50% Big Ten back. Like, he's really impactful, really sets the tone of the game. And again, if he's an offensive line that can start to get him more help, that's great. And you're also looking at Joe Hyman, who's coming back after a year of progression. Again, very real plus speed guy. I know everyone. It's always funny because the thing goes back to the USC team with White and Bush, but this is like everyone always says thunder and lightning for the running backs, and obviously not that level. But you do have your power back in Porter, and you do have the much faster option in Hyman. And Hyman, again, like, he's a factor in the return game. Nearly took a touchdown. Nearly took a kick return for a touchdown against Washington. He's a real serious plus speed back. And again, if they can actually find a way to set the tone up front this season, that gives Porter and Hyman opportunities to make plays. That opens up pass game for Preston Stone. So I think it should be a make or break season for Zach Lujan as offensive coordinator. but I think they've made the roster moves to give him a real fair shot at showing what he can do as a play caller.
So we mentioned some of the transfers on offense, more particularly offensive line and then Preston Stone. But we also had some notable transfers come in to Northwestern on the defensive side. And we look at, I think I was reading one of the Northwestern SB Nation articles for the 8 transfers on offense, kind of expected to be plug and play, if not more from what you've talked about. But what's the expectation for the transfers who have come in on the defense and what their impact might be on the 2025 defense?
Well, you're first of all, you're breaking my heart not reading our transfer tracker at Wildcat Report. I'll say that.
That was a bag full.
I think there are probably 5 defensive transfers I see that have a chance to make an immediate impact. Your first 2, I would say, are pretty much guaranteed like day 1 starters are Dylan Tatum from Michigan State, who was, I believe, an ad after spring ball. And then also Fred Davis II, who comes in from Jacksonville State, but has a 5-star pedigree in his background, I believe. Those are 2 guys that are probably plug and play. I mean, I believe Tatum played most of his time at Michigan State at safety, but he's coming in to work with Harlan Barnett, who is the assistant head coach and safeties coach at Northwestern. They probably already like their safeties with Damon Walters and Robert Fitzgerald. So Tatum is likely slotting in at nickelback. That is an area that has, again, I feel like I'm a broken record saying make or break, so I'll just say very important. Nickel has been very important to a defense kind of like it is anywhere, not just Northwestern. But, he has a chance to be a difference maker there like Rod Hurd was when Northwestern went to a bowl game in David Braun's first season and really have a chance to be just the true embodiment of what that position should be, of like half corner, half linebacker, an ability to make plays in both spaces, in both the run and the pass. And Tatum has a chance to reach that potential. I think last season, again, there were some injuries in the defensive secondary, and they cycled a few different guys in there, whether that's Braden Turner, Robert Fitzgerald, and they did a solid job. But sometimes what's needed to make a defense hum is to have a real plus player in that position, and Tatum has real plus potential there. So I think of the defensive transfers, he's probably the one I would put at top billing. And then, again, I would say Fred Davis is probably starting at corner next to Josh Fussell on the other side. Then two potential starters are actually, kind of competing against each other, both from Power 4 to Power 4 transfers, which has in the past was pretty unusual for Northwestern, but they have a few different ones this season. They have Yanni Karloftis coming in from Purdue and Jack Sadowski V coming in from Iowa State. And Sadowski's a local kid, played at Batavia with overlap for a couple seasons with Ryan Bowe, who's probably the 2nd or 3rd string quarterback this year. They played on the same high school team. And I think both of those guys have a chance to compete for the 2nd linebacker spot next to Mac Uline, who is, lock, stock, and barrel. He's starting at Mike linebacker. You can guarantee that. And then next to him will probably be a 3-way battle for the will role. Will probably be Karloftis, Sadowski, and then Braden Bruss is coming back. He didn't get a lot of snaps last year because they don't really rotate their linebackers as much. Normally they kind of pick and stick with their 2 guys. Bruss was taking the 2nd linebacker snaps in spring ball, which takes me to that point of originally I thought when Karloftis was coming in after 100 tackles over 2 seasons, a lot of starts at Purdue, I thought he would go right into that 2nd linebacker role. But watching them in spring ball, it looked like that's going to Bruss. And it looks like Karloftis might be more of like a depth piece or in a Sam strong linebacker role. Not exactly sure yet where Sadowski fits in, but he also has a very competitive resume coming in from Iowa State. So again, it's a long and illustrious history of Northwestern linebackers, and they really have 3 or 4 guys who can fit the bill there this season. And I think the other impact, the other defensive transfer that can make an impact is also have Miguel Jackson from Utah State coming in at defensive tackle. I would say the prohibitive starters ahead of him are going to be Carmine Bastone and Najee Story. I'd say you could pretty much book that if those 2 guys are healthy, but Braun and defensive line coach Christian Smith love to rotate guys in and out. So I think you could see Miguel Jackson definitely taking 25 to 30 snaps a game this season.
I loved your point about the nickelback because I think we're seeing that a lot more in college football now where teams aren't. It's not necessarily like a true 4-2-5 base defense, but a lot of teams are running more that base nickel defense. Given there's just this more propensity for 3 wide receiver base sets from opposing offenses, and I think that transitions well into kind of what I wanted to wrap up about the defense is. You touched on the injuries in the secondary last year, and that certainly plays a role into a pass defense that finished 89th in the country in yards per game allowed. In terms of approaching things for 2025, do you view changes being more so just hey, we got a couple of new starters coming in, we got guys healthy back, that should be enough for us to improve, or is there going to be any schematic changes on the back end you see, or any schematic changes up front in terms of pressure packages or just player personnel usages to just try to get more pressure on the quarterback and see if that's going to help in that regard?
Yeah, I think from a roster perspective, I think they're counting a lot on internal progression. They didn't really go out and make a big push to add edge rush. They do have, again, I think when I mentioned Caleb Tiernan as top 2 pro prospect, number 2 is Anto Saka, who's their pass rushing DN, and it's not unique, but they had a tough run of injuries last season, and Saka was one of them. I think you saw him get an injury right around Washington, right around week 4, and then that kind of impact his speed. But I think early in the season against Duke, and some of those other games, you saw, this sounds like the Moneyball quote, but it's like he pops off the screen. When he's fully healthy, he's operating at a different level of speed than pretty much everyone. Like I said, it's the Big Ten, so there are going to be times where you have NFL left tackles or right tackles out there. But even then, he's someone that is just operating at a different. He has more gears than everyone else does. And they're counting on a big progression for him to come out and basically, and I think there's mutual trust for him to do this. He's one of the media day reps this summer. It's him, Stone, and Joe Hyman. They're counting on him to go out and put out NFL tape. Just plain and simple. Is that he came in as a 4-star, which is always a headline at Northwestern, and he's continued to build his strength to go with his speed to keep him on the field. Frankly, again, because it was really fast, but if there were Big Ten linemen that were able to make consistent contact, then he wasn't really much of a factor in the run game. But he's continued to build his strength, and this year he's built like an every down defensive end. So if they can put him out there for, get him up from looking at a 35 to 45% strong pass rush situations to now we're looking at getting you 70, 80% of snaps and really just every play have the offense need to know where that guy is, that's a different story. And they think he can be that this year. Also getting Richie Haggerty back. He's another serious veteran player, I think in his 5th or 6th season. He's in still more of that pass rush specialist type role, but he missed all of last season after a fall camp injury. They get him back. And then, again, outside of that, I think they're counting on internal progression and also a better offense that can get them off the field more often and keep the stamina bar a little higher.
Clinton, is there anything else you wanted to touch on with the defense there?
No, I'm going to let you have your last signature question. I don't want to impede upon that.
My signature question. So don't check my math on this because it doesn't exactly play out exactly like this. I just confirmed.
Ryan and math don't go well, Matt.
No, I'm not.
If you were ever wondering.
Not a math guy. But more often than not, the last 7 years, it seems like Northwestern does this devilish dance where one year they're not so good, the next year they're pretty good, and if that trend holds true this year, it should be a little bit better of a year for Northwestern this year. But the other side of that coin is there is a schedule that features Oregon, Penn State, Michigan, and Illinois, 3 of those teams who are getting a lot of preseason playoff love. One team who kind of is that I still don't understand, but that's a story for another day. So given the challenges, the
Michigan
schedule,
or Illinois?
Michigan, I don't understand the Michigan love at all. I'm not. I can go on a tangent about this, and I don't want to bore you with that. But given the challenges that having maybe a little bit more of a top-heavy schedule can possess, what would you view as a reasonable expectation, or what would constitute a successful season for Northwestern in 2025?
Yeah. you really miss the Big Ten West in years like this.
Yeah.
Like, you
Be a
miss,
damn near shoe-in for the Big Ten championship with this team.
Yeah, well, not necessarily, but it's like I think it's a different. I think a lot of the Northwestern teams in the past, not that the schedules were easy by any means. It's still a Big Ten conference schedule, but it's just a whole different world now. Of where before you would have maybe play Ohio State or maybe you play a Michigan team. But again, for a lot of those years, Michigan was good, but not at the level that they've been some of these past few years. But now you're going in and basically you're guaranteed to play 2 playoff teams, and that is a level of. It's just a different level of schedule than a lot of the Northwestern teams in the past sometimes, or that fans are used to. Again, sometimes those grit, spit, and duct tape teams that would take a slow start and then turn it around and finish with 7, 8, 9, or even 10 wins. Like I think one of the hallmark seasons is 2018 when they start 1-3, I think it is, or it's like this year they lose to Akron, but they come back and. Honestly, it's one of the better teams in program history, and put it all together, go to the Big Ten championship, win their bowl game, awesome year. But a lot of that is predicated on the schedules that they play now. That's just not. If you start 1-3, it's over. And I think they went through that a little bit last year, of where it's like they have these more aggressively scheduled non-conference games that are just not. This is kind of again like more of my pet project than answering your question, but if you'll humor me, of where it's like. Of
course.
The way that some of these non-conference games are scheduled in the past, of like Northwestern wants to go play Duke, or Northwestern now is going to go play at Tulane. Like this more successful teams of like look at Indiana's non-conference, which again I know is kind of like, and they were a way better team than Northwestern was last year, but it's like that is a team that is serious about their aspirations and understands what it takes non-conference. Whereas like Northwestern is playing. Starts this season with a road game at a Group of 5 team that won 9 or more games last season. Do you know how many other Big Ten teams are doing that?
None.
One. UCLA goes to play UNLV.
No.
And that's a trip of like 250 miles. Northwestern's going to go fly to New Orleans. So, and optimistically, I think they can compete with Tulane. I think they can even I think they will beat Tulane. But when we talk about goals and like some of that Northwestern magic, it's a different landscape now. That being said, I do think that their goal internally and what I think externally is also a reasonable one of assessing the program, where it is with the talent they've brought in, the level of competition, is that they should want to be 6-6 and make a bowl game. Again, because I think you're just doing a quick rundown of the schedule. It's like I think you kind of have a gradient on the schedule of I think you have absolute, or not absolute, but I'll say pretty much assured losses of, again, I'll just say these are frankly national title contenders. You play at Penn State, you host Oregon. Unless there's divine intervention, that's probably 2 losses right there. Then you mentioned that you have another 2 teams that I'll say internally have playoff aspirations. Like if you ask Michigan, if you ask Illinois what they want to do this year, they want to go be a playoff team. I think those, again, that's another 2 tough games that are probably losses. Then I think you go into in between of like programs that probably might say playoff, but in their heart of hearts, they want to be bowl game. You're at USC and you're at Nebraska. Those are also 2 tough games, but if you tell me at the end of the year that Preston Stone really clicked and they stole one of those, I wouldn't be terribly surprised. Then on the other end of that, you have potential wins. I think you have at Tulane to start the season. Then you have Minnesota at Wrigley Field. I think kind of to the point of like how to pick year to year, not really being sure what they are. I think Minnesota is very similar to that of like, it's always kind of uncertain whether or not Fleck is going to get total buy-in, because when he does, they're awesome. And sometimes you have situations like 2 years ago when they blew a 20-point lead at Northwestern because they looked like they wanted to get on the bus early. But again, there are also times where that comes after 2 seasons where they beat the brakes off of Northwestern. So I have them in kind of the middle. Then I think games that they should go in wanting to win. They host Purdue and they host UCLA. And then 2 games where the sky would be falling if they don't are Western Illinois and Louisiana Monroe. So again, kind of in that gradient. I know that's maybe a little more detailed than you were looking for, but
perfect.
I think that's the gradient you go into the season with, and you say, hey, we want to be 6-6.
I think it's reasonable.
Absolutely.
Just kind of riffing off of that, and what do you just view, and this is not me saying David Braun needs to be on the hot seat or anything like that, but what do you just kind of view his overall leash is at this point in his tenure, especially given how his tenure kind of started with the ending of Pat Fitzgerald's tenure leading immediately into it?
Yeah, I think it really. Again, I think this is a season in the balance. I think hot seat would be wrong. I think I would be very surprised if he wasn't coaching Northwestern next year. I'll be honest about that. Like, I think he's shown an incredible job of building the program. I think there's been a lot of foundation work behind the scenes from him that he maybe doesn't beat his chest about, of maybe issues or problems with whether that's roster management or I'll kind of reframe and restart here of looking at Northwestern from an administrative perspective. They have a new athletic director of serious caliber that just came in, and Mark Jackson. He came in, he took the job from he moved in and upgraded from Villanova, which is as good of one of the best basketball only jobs you can have in the country. He's overseeing the completion of an $850 million stadium. He just re-signed the head basketball coach, and now he's about to critically assess the football coach. And I think that is probably the best frame to put it in, is that this is a season of critical assessment. And I think Braun and Jackson have worked together, and they have made a lot of strides. Again, when I talk about structural changes and things that they have accomplished together, like when you look at Northwestern's incoming transfer class, it is miles different than where it was this time even last year, because Braun and Jackson and a lot of other people talked to admissions, and they got that window expanded into winter. Because before, with the way that Northwestern's academic quarters work, it was very hard to bring in players that could play immediately in spring ball. So again, that is, if you watch Northwestern next year and you're looking at Preston Stone, Griffin Wilde, Xavier Gray, those guys, and you ever think, wow, that's a nice play. It was against the rules for Northwestern to bring those guys in the past 100 years of Northwestern, however many triple-digit years of Northwestern football, they couldn't get those guys in. Braun and Jackson accomplished that together. So I think in many ways, Braun has modernized the program, and he's fixed a lot of the plumbing. Whether or not he is able to push the competitive advantage to pay that off, I think we'll see. Because, yeah, to me, is like, if Northwestern wants to push past this zone of like, if you look at a schedule like this and you want to be like 6-6 bowl competitive, if you want to start picking up wins, you got to look at it's like, how are we better than USC now? How are we better than Nebraska? How are we better than Illinois? And you got to start comparing budgets. You got to start comparing academic restrictions. I mean, that's whole hours and hours of other stuff there. So I think what this goes to say is, I think with the way Northwestern currently operates, I think Braun is doing a fantastic job. I think he's going out, he's meeting based on the level of production on the field and the resources that he has. I think he's doing an excellent job on on the recruiting trail. I think he's done a very good job of evaluating players and obtaining players without the ability to basically give out signing bonuses like many other programs do, and he's still picking up serious quality commitments. But so I think that's the point, is that within the traditional Northwestern framework, I think he's doing a good job. But with the quality of athletic director they've just added, with the investment in facilities, if they want to continue to push boundaries and continue to push the ceiling of the program, if they want to go out and, again, pushing salary, if you want like an $8 to $10 million coach because you're like, we want to go push these programs, that's going to be one thing. And I don't know if Braun necessarily fits that mold. You know, he's not someone that's like, again, the comparison is always Northwestern and Illinois. And there's like, when you compare the social media presence of Brett Bielema versus the social media presence of David Braun is someone who is totally focused on winning football games. Bielema knows how to play to a crowd. So if Northwestern wants more of like the salesman type attitude, and there's critical assessment based on, you know, like, again, the massive expenditures in the program of, we want a head coach with more experience, then I think this is a year of critical assessment. But with the tools he's been given and what Northwestern offers, I think he's done frankly, I think he's done an excellent job. And I think if he wins 5 or more games this season, he should probably get some kind of extension, because I do think it's always one of the things with coaches, and I think I'm maybe going on and on here, but it's like sometimes you create the standards that are then held against you of like, he came in and did such a good job with the initial rebuild that people forget that, again, there are a lot of frustrations around him going 4-8. 4-8 is the third best result of the last 6 years at Northwestern. So again, to my point, it's like, hey, if they want to totally reset expectations, if they want to push to ceiling push, and if they again with the Northwestern like donor base, if you can find them, the money is there if you can find it. So if they want to go out and spend at a competitive level, if they want to invest another 30 to 40 million annually in, if you include what the revenue share is going to be at 20 million a year, the coaching staff, I mean, you can look at what Missouri's NIL spending is, and you can keep in mind that Missouri's wasn't a playoff team last year. And they've spent, I think it's $30 million in the last fiscal year. Wow. So it's like, so if they want to go out and do that, then I think that's a point of a new athletic director might want to make a new hire who is more comfortable in that space. But I think if they want a football coach that's going to continue to develop players in a Northwestern model with the tools they have, I think he's one of the best guys to do that. And he's proven that he can do that. And like I said, I think in a year of critical assessment, if it's 5 or more wins with the schedule they have, with the roster he's building, with the challenges he's had to overcome, he should get an extension after this year.
I'd say that's reasonable. I like the transfer point too, because you'll hear it with some of the other, like I think Notre Dame's the big one that comes to mind, that academic program on the national level, and always talking about the transfer restrictions. And then it gets brought up, like, you think like Stanford or Vanderbilt or Northwestern, these programs that have a higher level of academic prestige that maybe aren't as all in on football, and just their ability to get even graduate level transfers in, and their inability, I guess, in the past, just really, especially in this day and age of roster building, just really hampers what you can be as a program, especially if you're having that attrition going out. You can't supplement it with college-ready bodies to come in and compete. Instead, you're just focused on trying to get in kids from the high school ranks.
And to that point, again, like I said, Braun and working with the administration, he's revolutionized that at Northwestern. That was not, I think one of his major quotes after the season was, the way Northwestern operates is going to be turned on its head. And he fulfilled that, and I think he's done a great job of not just being again, I think he's definitely someone who works more behind the scenes, and he's done a great job of moving quietly and making a lot of small and big changes that have helped Northwestern modernize and helped Northwestern compete. And again, he's really, I think, in a lot of ways, shored up and reestablished the foundation and floor of a program that had won 4 games in the past 2 years when he had to take an interim job. And I think he's done a lot of great work there. Again, we'll see how that pans out this year. Again, I think he has all the tools ahead of him to make a bowl game. If that isn't how it pans out, I think Northwestern fans will understand if there's a critical assessment or changing coordinators. But I think he absolutely, again, I think my prediction for the season is 6-6. And I think a lot of that is based on the work he's done with the team.
Clinton, anything else you want to touch on there, bud?
Oh man, I'm excited. You mentioned how Northwestern has the ebbs and flows in the years that they pop up. I'm excited to see if that happens this year. I'm excited a lot for Preston Stone, and then Cam Porter's health, and then obviously the additions that we talked about on defense. It's going to be a fun year of Wildcat football in the last year that they get to be right next to the lake in the stadium there. So. Matt, do you have any confirmation? Did any footballs last year go in the water?
No, I don't think they did.
Okay.
I feel like I got you guys' hopes up. I don't think they did.
Maybe this year. Maybe we'll get one.
In my defense, the stands got built up a little bit further than I thought they would, but no.
Oh, unfortunately. We just need a really windy day out there. And
absolutely.
We'll take one out. Before we let you get out of here, Matt, with your guys' big move coming up imminently now. We are now about 2 hours away. Let the listeners know where they can find your work.
Yeah, on Twitter, I'm at M_Shelton33. We are now going to be Northwestern's On3 affiliate, as On3 and North absorbs Rivals, and they go through that merger. You'll be able to find us. It'll be on3.com/sites/wildcat-report, and that'll be where the site is going forward.
All right, sir. Matt Shelton, thank you once again for joining us this evening as we preview the Northwestern Wildcats as we kick off our fall preview series. We will be back with you guys Wednesday this week. We just have a 2-pack for you with the holiday weekend. We're not going to do anything on Thursday or Friday because you all probably have things you'd rather be doing than listening to a college football podcast, like having fun and hanging out with families. So we'll be back with you guys Wednesday. We were talking Illinois Fighting Illini with Sonny Verma, Clinton,
A
confirmed.
Locked On Illinois podcast. Yes.
It'll be fun. So we'll see you guys then. Thanks everyone for joining us. We'll see you in a couple days.
This is